Hello there, I'm Peter McCormack.
And this is Gary Leland, and you're listening to episode 80 of the Crypto Cousins podcast.
Feed your interest in Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies by joining Hall of Fame podcaster Gary Leland on the Crypto Cousins podcast. And remember, we are all cousins in the world of crypto. This week's price of Bitcoin.
$3,403. That's down $162, or 4.6% over the last 7 days. Howdy, howdy, howdy. Welcome to the show. Peter, let me give you a big welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah. I've been listening to your show for a while. I think I started listening about 3 or 4 episodes before you did an interview with Roger Ver. So I don't know how long that's been, but I really like your show.
So Roger was like episode 16, 17, 18, something around there. So yeah, that's a long time. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Being a podcaster, I explore Bitcoin podcasts all the time. I mean, I'm always searching for new ones, listening to an episode or two and deciding whether it stays in my podcast or listening to bag, which most of them don't, but yours did. Yours is a great show. Before we get into it, though, for the audience who may not be familiar with you, give us a real short bio.
All right. Okay. So I live in a little town called Bedford in England, which isn't far from London. I have a advertising background. So I worked in advertising for 20 years. Came out of that a couple of years ago, fell into crypto, fell down the crypto rabbit hole, and set up the podcast, obviously. And I'm a single dad. I've got 2 kids, and love football.
Or as we would call it here, I guess, soccer, right?
Well, I also love your football.
Oh, well, cool. Well, I live in Arlington. We got the Dallas Cowboys, but I'm ashamed to say I know nothing about your football at all, except that I know they run. I don't even know the teams. I'm not very educated on European football.
Well, I watched the Rams on Sunday.
I missed that game. I saw the second game. I was on the road. Yeah, that was a great game, I heard. Also, I want to mention your site, because you didn't mention it, is whatbitcoindid.com. And I can tell people right now, you need to go listen to that site. You know, and one of the things about your show that kind of interested me to begin with, I haven't known a lot of podcasters that do this to the degree that you do it, is you travel to a ton of your interviews. Like when you interviewed Roger Ver, you went to Japan.
Yeah, well, Bitcoin was at 20 grand then. So traveling was a lot easier. But yeah, no, my life was very different then. So I separated from my ex-wife, and we share custody of our children. So the week the children were with her, I used to just get on a plane and go out and do 1, 2, 3 interviews. I think I did my first 25 in person. But my son came to live with me full time. It's about the beginning of the summer. And also because I went to 2 shows a week, traveling for all the interviews just became impossible. But I'm glad I did it because I learned a lot about interviewing people from being sat with them. So, but it's very different online. But I think it definitely helped me, and it probably helped accelerate the kind of reach of the show because I think there was an appreciation of the travel. But yeah, I kind of miss it, but it was very tiring as well.
Well, imagine, though, the level of relationships made were accelerated, maybe I should say. I mean, you know, you and I are meeting each other now for the first time. I would say we've chatted online about this interview, but we're meeting online right now. We're meeting for the first time. You know, we will probably become acquaintances or friends during the next 5 to 10 years, you know, by doing another interview maybe here or there or seeing each other at events. But when you give someone that attention of flying to them and spending that kind of time with them, you must have built some great relationships with some key people in a short amount of time. I guess that's what I'm getting at. It took me a long time to get there, but that's what I'm getting at.
Yeah, I guess you're right. But you do that. But another reason I did it was I learned very quickly, because I did my first 2 in person because I was in the city. So I did my first one in LA, and Luke Martin was in LA, so I did it with him. And then I interviewed Nick Patel, the day trader Nick, up, I can't remember where it was, in York or something. And it was the time I got with them before and after the interview helped me understand them a bit more. Whereas when you do an interview online, it's kind of cold. It's you say hello, you set up the show, and then you go for it. But, you know, when I was with Jameson Lop out in North Carolina, we didn't just do the interview. We went for barbecue together. We went to shotguns. So I got to know him. And from that kind of probably built a better rapport than I would if yeah, like you said, I've just done it online, and he's been super helpful to the show. I spent, he's helped me get interviews, and just supported me with some of my ideas. So yeah, I guess you're right. I guess that has made a big difference. And if circumstances were different or life was different, I would certainly try and go back to doing as many as I can in person. And when I do head out to the States tomorrow, I intend to record a couple in Vegas and a couple in San Francisco, and get back to having a few more in-person interviews.
I think it shows that person that you really consider them to be someone that you respect, and they give back that respect. I mean, I think it's one of those type things. You get what you give. So, yeah. And speaking of barbecue and shooting guns, so you feel more like an American now going out and shooting guns?
Do you know what? Do you know what, man? Like, I love the States. I must have been to America, I don't know, 40 times, maybe 50. I've lost count. I've been to LA a bunch of times, Vegas, New York. I've been to Florida. I've been to North Carolina. I've been to Texas. I've been to your home state. I love Dallas. I'm a really, really big fan of Dallas.
Well, we need to get you here for Bit Block Boom.
When is that?
It's August 17th, that weekend.
Man, if I can, like, I went to South by Southwest, and I decided to keep an extra day at the end to spend a night in Dallas, and I just had the best night. I really loved it. No, my like, I always feel like my soul is in America. I don't know why. I've just always loved it. I think it's just so vast, and there's so many things to see, and I really like all the people I meet out there. You meet some douches as well, but you get that everywhere. But no, I'm a big fan of the States. I would move there tomorrow if I could.
Yeah, I went to London a few years ago. I enjoyed London completely. I think wherever you go, it's what you make out of it.
Yeah.
I think it's what. Well, what I want to talk about, since we were talking about on the road there, I segued out for a second on the topic. I want to know, what is your on the road production equipment consist of? Like I said, this interview is going to be different from most of you crypto listeners, because I'm getting into podcasting here with a crypto twist. So I want to know, what do you use when you're on the road? What is your production setup?
I take my full gear, dude. I've got a Pelican case in there. I've got 2 Shure mic. I've got 2. I'll tell you a funny story in a second, but I got 2 mic stands. I've got my Zoom H6. I've got my cloud lifters. I've got my cables. Yeah, take the whole lot, pack it up, and when I'm with somebody, I unpack it all and do it. But the funny thing is, these mic stands, right? They've got these big, hard, like solid metal bases to weigh them down, and every single time I go through customs, because I put one case in, because they always charge a lot of money to put a second case in, right? And this case fits in the overhead lockers, so I'm always taking it on the plane with me. But every time I go through customs, they stop me. But the first time I did it, not only did I had a camera with me as well, which had one of those square batteries. So I had the square battery and these big leg weights, and when I first went through, I got taken to one side, and the guy, like the head of security, is like, "What have you got in the case?" And I was like, "I've got audio equipment." He goes, "What else?" And I was like, "Just audio equipment." He goes, "No, you haven't. What else have you got in there?" I was like, "I really don't know what's going on here. I've got audio equipment." He's like, "Well, we have to go through your case now. You've got wires hanging out. You've got batteries. And basically these big, so mine kind of flagged up of bomb warning, because through the scanner, the big blocks look like Semtex. Then you've got wires going around, and then you've got like the square battery. So it's yeah. So I got stopped. Oh. So I never put the batteries in anymore, but I still get stopped almost 9 times out of 10. And then they unpack it all, and they have to repack it. It's such a pain.
Yeah, it's almost the opposite for me, because when I used to travel earlier podcasting, I mean, I had so much more equipment than we carry now, and my case would be just filled, my backpack filled with batteries and cables and microphones and all kinds of stuff, and I would never get checked. And then I'd go through with nothing, and I'd get checked. You got to be kidding. I always make a joke to my wife. You got to be kidding. I come through here with so much stuff, it must be scary, and no one looks, and I come in here with nothing but a tube of toothpaste, and they check me. So that's funny how you don't know. But yeah, was that kind of like, when that happened to you, was that kind of a, was your tension getting up there as to what's going on here?
Oh, dude, I was panicking. I was like, crap, what have I put in there that I shouldn't have? Or was like somebody got hold of my bag and put something in? Like, it was a real panic, because, these airport people are scary. But lesson learned, I know what to put in the case now and what not to. I still get stopped all the time, but like, I haven't been through that experience of somebody saying, it looks like you've got a bomb in your case.
Right. That's the ultimate, like, you're in trouble here. You better,
yeah.
You better stay calm, dude. So I imagine you use the same Shure mics at home, And do you basically use the same setup at home, or do you have a different setup for your house, for your home office or studio or whatever?
Yeah, I mean, I'm using my Shure mic with you now. It's wired through my Zoom. I use my cloud lifter to record. So what I do when I record from home, I record myself locally onto my Zoom, so I get the best quality sound I can get from me. Then when the guest is different, sometimes I ask them to record. Sometimes I use audio hijack, like you said you do. I usually like to have a backup. I mean, you know what it's like with this. Like, sound is the bane of our life. And yeah, I'm usually fixing it up afterwards. I've just been engineering 3 people together today, 3 different sound files. They all sound different. It's a right pain. But yeah, that was one of the beauties of doing it in person. You just had a better sound quality.
Yeah, I one time did an hour interview with someone in Japan, and I was using an off-site recording setup that I didn't record, and I went to get my file, and it wasn't there. So I know the pain that you can go through. And it was like, at the time, one of my top interviews ever, for another show I did years ago. Oh my gosh, I was so sad. And it was so hard. It was so hard to email them and say, hey, I lost that whole file. Can we do it again?
Oh, man.
And they were like, sure, no problem. I was like, really? Oh my gosh.
I worry about that it's never happened to me, but I worry about it. I did have it once where I forgot to start record and lost like 5 minutes at the start, and that's it. But I do worry about that. Like, every time when an interview's finished, just press the play button to check it's there, and it's a panic every time. I've never had it, but like, I get what you're going through there.
But forgetting the pressing the play button, that don't even count that, because that happens all the time. Oh my gosh, I didn't do it now. I'm teasing. But I do that like once every 6 months, and since I've been doing it since 2004, that's a lot of times I've done it. Where do you host your podcast?
Oh, I use Libsyn. Do you know Libsyn?
I use Libsyn. Yeah, I've been using them since 2000. They're all great friends of mine. Rob there and Elsie, and they're all great buddies of mine. I even knew the Daves that built that. That was built by 4 guys named Dave back in 2004. And they sold it to the people that own it now, but it was Dave, and Dave. And I think there might have been a 5th guy with a name that wasn't Dave. But 4 out of the 5 were named Dave, so it was a confusing situation if you knew them personally and you called their office. Now you do a lot of research. I'd actually say more than the majority of crypto podcasters, at least ways. I'd like to go into your research a little bit and tell me about that.
So the way I see it, like, this stuff is really complicated. Okay, it just is. When you start talking about consensus mechanisms and game theory and mining, all these different topics and different subjects that come together to form what is the cryptocurrency industry or Bitcoin industry, it's complicated stuff, and it goes over my head. My background's creative. I always worked in the creative industry, ideas person, like writing, designs, campaigns. That's where I come from. I'm not a technical person. So I find it very difficult to understand some of these topics. I think that is to benefit of the podcast, because therefore I ask probably some of the simpler questions. But I also therefore want to be very, very prepared for my interview. So, I can, at best, if I'm in a rush, I can do a 2-hour prep on a certain type of interview. Certain interviews, I'd like to give myself like a day if I can, at least 6 hours, just so I can be sure like I'm really ready and really prepared. And also, one of the other things, and you'll know what this is like. I mean, you're trying to get half an hour. I'm always trying to get at least an hour. If you've got a guest who doesn't give long answers, it's a real struggle, because you might have like 20 questions, and if they're giving short answers, that takes you to maybe only half an hour in. And I've had that, and I've had one where I've kind of dragged it out to extend it. So I do a lot of prep, and the way I do it, I just build out a structure. So I use a piece of software called Agenda, and what I do is I just create sections. And so what I'll do is like I will always start with an intro, which is maybe the welcome, the personal things about themselves. And then what I'll do is I'll break it down into sections of specific topics that I want to talk to them about. So, for example, with Tone Vase, when I interviewed him, I want to talk to him about his conference. I want to talk about trading. I want to talk about shitcoin. So what I'll do is I will create the sections, and then I'll put in all the kind of things I can think off the top of my head. And I create lists. I'm it's quite mad when I do it, really. But I create lists, and I put in bold at the start of each bullet point, either it's a point or a question. So if I'm making a point, then I know it's a point. And if it's a question, I know it's a question. And then if there's sub-questions, I just indent them. And then what I do is once the first draft is done, I will then do a search for them online. and see if there's any recent news. I will go through the last kind of week of their Twitter feed, and then I will probably try and listen to at least one or two of their previous interviews to see the topics they talk about, the things that get them going. Yeah, and end up just building out this whole structure. And then when I'm doing an interview, I've got that on my laptop in front of me.
I kind of do the same thing, but maybe I need to move to that agenda because mine's just a sloppy mess on a sheet on a doc. So maybe I need to check that. Where's that agenda at? Agenda.com or?
I have no idea. I got it in the Apple App Store, but like you just find what works for you. Yeah, you just find what works for you. I have tried to do a couple of interviews with no agenda at all, and I've got through it. And I guess over time, I don't know your background. My background isn't podcasting. So when I did my first interview, I hadn't really ever interviewed anyone since, well, except when I was like 15 and I had a fanzine, but I hadn't really interviewed anyone. And I've got a buddy called Rich Roll who's got a very good podcast, and he has said to me, one of the hardest things is listening to the guest and trying to take in what they're saying so you can respond, whilst also keeping track of your own questions.
Yes.
And I mean, it's really hard, but I think what happens is over time you get better, right? And you start to learn how to shoot the shit back and forth and kind of debate with them and or just have a discussion. And so I think I'm getting better, but I still need that sheet to go with me.
I agree completely. Last episode, or 2 episodes ago, I interviewed Rolf Versus, who does Bitcoin mining. And he was telling me about something, and I'm listening, and I didn't even hear it. I went right into the next question, and I'm editing it because I do my own editing. And I listened to him, what he said, and I'm going, oh, my gosh, I can't believe I didn't ask him about that. I'm really interested in that. And I went, wow, that's great, and went right on to my next question as long as I've been doing that. So I think that's something you always have a hard time. Maybe the greats don't, but I think that's something you can always have a hard time about. Your show is kind of bucking the trend right now, I think, because most people I talk to, well, everybody I talk to in the podcasting world, their numbers are really, really down, their listener numbers, compared to when Bitcoin was $20,000. As Bitcoin has dropped, their listeners have dropped. I guess the guy that sells T-shirts online, his sales have dropped. Conferences have dropped. I mean, everything has dropped. But your numbers, unlike everybody else I've talked to, are going up and at a pretty good rate, I would say.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, I guess one of the things, like, I started my podcast when it was pretty much 20K, right? I started it at the end of November 17, so kind of at the peak. So my numbers were low to begin with, but yeah, no, I've been able to grow the podcast, have a lot of good traction. I went into partnership with Let's Talk Bitcoin and joined their network, which was helpful. I think it's hard to talk about yourself, but I think the positive thing that I've done is, or the thing that works in favor for me, is I have a background in marketing. Digital marketing. So I understand branding, understand design, I understand web design. So I've put a lot of focus into my website and the brand. So when an interview is shared out, like, people recognize the branding. So I've done that. I think also this is a full-time gig for me. I don't know if it is for you, but this is a full-time gig for me. So if I'm not interviewing, I'm optimizing my website or I'm writing content. I'm always doing something to continually push the podcast forward and try and make it better. Like, I really have to make it work. My son lives with me full time. I have to do this. I'll tell you what my day is like. So yesterday, right, I get up at 6. I do an hour's work. Then the kids get up. I get them ready for school. I have to drop my daughter off at first, but my boiler's gone, so there's no hot water. So I drop my daughter off. Then I take my son down because he's 14. He's like, I want a shower. So I take him down to the gym so he can have a shower. Get him back to school. Then I'm at home waiting for the plumber to come and fix my boiler, and then I've got my friends come around for 2 hours. They're launching a website. They need some help. Then I have to go into town to do some jobs, and then I have to go to the doctors to pick up a form so my son can get his blood test. And then I have to do the school run and dinner and everything. So I can't just go to London and get a job. And if I do get a full-time job, I can't do all these duties for them. So I don't have a choice. I've got to make this work. I've got to ensure that I have consistent revenue so I can be around for a dad. And yeah, it's a lot of pressure. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know if that's the answer I'm looking for, but I have to make this work.
Now, you just mentioned in that conversation something I'm going to go back to. But first of all, I understand what you're just saying. You don't have a choice. You have to make it work. There's no choice. That's your job. You mentioned Let's Talk Bitcoin. That's one I'm not familiar with. Or maybe I listened to it a year and a half ago and didn't listen again.
Yeah, so they've got a network of podcasts. So I've joined them. So I, work closely with them. They distribute my podcast as well, and we work together on the sales. So for example, if I get a sales inquiry, I usually hand it over to them. So that just takes some of the load off me. Also, it's led to greater exposure because they've got really great assets. They've got Bitcoin Magazine. So yeah, I've had a relationship with them since my interview with Eric Voorhees, which I can't remember the date of that, but yeah, I've got a close relationship with them.
So do you get stats from them? Because I've had someone, I'm not saying them or even at that level because I don't know who they are and I don't even know who contacted me. I had someone contact me one time wanting to be on their network, and they weren't able to give me any stats as the downloads. And so I was going, I don't know. I don't really think I want that. I want to know my numbers. So if I have an advertiser contact me, I can say, here are my numbers. Do they give you any information, or they just have their information and then they use it when they're selling sponsors for you or things?
We have a merged stats. So we both have access to the stats, and it's all merged and works together. So yeah, it's not really a problem for us.
No, that's really nice then. Yeah, that's really, because that was the problem with when I was looking at it. I was going, well, gosh, I don't even know how many listens I have. And if more people listen to me on your channel than mine, I could look like I have no listens when someone contacts me, and I may have 100,000, but I just don't know.
Yeah.
That's something I guess only a podcaster would care about.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Hey, while we're talking about stats and stuff, and I'm getting ready to get into a little numbers, I want to really give a little plug here for myself. I produce this show every Tuesday, and if listeners aren't aware, I also produce the 4-Minute Crypto Show every weekday. So when you put the two of these together, it's a lot of time, as you know. It's a lot of time, and there's costs like production, distribution, and that's really all cool because I really enjoy putting this content together because I learn so much when I do it, but I'm kind of at a fork in the road. I really don't make enough producing the show to expand any further, and that's really what I want to do. I want to do this full-time. I really want to go full-time and produce more videos, more podcasts, and eventually build a full media network for Bitcoin and crypto content. I'd even like to bring on media producers and creators and help them with their shows. So I ask my listeners now, instead of doing commercials, for their support. So if you enjoy the podcast I'm listening to, please consider going to CryptoCousins.com/sponsor and just show me some love. You can be a one-time sponsor with cash or crypto. You can become a monthly patron, and that's a great way to sponsor the show. You can even donate with PayPal. Of course, you're welcome to listen to this show forever, even if you don't sponsor my efforts. I just ask that people take a look at CryptoCousins.com/sponsor. So I've gone to just asking for people to show their love instead of doing commercials at the moment, trying to grow the audience. My new thing I'm doing, Peter, is that's my plug. I've been given about 4 weeks, and it seems to be working. I think people, maybe they're going, gosh, I like this content, and if he needs the support, I'll throw him some crypto.
Yeah, I think sometimes people maybe don't understand how much work goes into something like this. So, I've had a couple of people approach me, say they want to launch a podcast. Can I help? And I'm like, always, yeah, of course. You got to pay this stuff forward. And then I give them access to, I use a bit of software called Wunderlist, which is my to-do list. So I invite them to my to-do list.
I use Wunderlist.
It's great, right? So I invite them to my Wunderlist so they can see the to-do list for each show, and they're like, whoa. I mean, there's like 9 categories in there for what I do for each show. So you've got the prep for the interview, how to conduct the interview, then the planning the marketing, then the audio prep, setting up on Patreon, then getting the audio file ready, preparing the graphics, publishing, adding it to the website, and go live. Like, it's a full procedure. I think it probably prep, interview, post-production, engineering, go live. I think for me, it's like 20 hours a show. So I'm doing 2 a week. So I'm spending 40 hours just on the 2 shows. And then all the work behind the scenes. So I'm personally spending like 60, 70 hours a week on this, which is cool. I don't mind. And hopefully if revenues go up, I can get people to help. I can offload bits onto people. But yeah, a lot of work goes into this. And I don't think people kind of realize. I think they think you just, there's also the hustle of getting the interviews right, because all these people are being contacted multiple times. So I just don't think people realize how much work goes into it. It has to be a full-time gig for me to make it work. And, I do need advertisers and Patreon contributors, and that's all going well, and revenues are great. And if they keep going up, I don't want people to think I'm suddenly kind of loaded, because I'll be reinvesting. If I make enough money on the podcast, I'll try and do maybe some videos, or I'll outsource the production to somebody else, or or maybe treat myself. But it's a lot of work goes into this, and I don't know how long you've had yours, but mine's now 14 months, I think. And only now, after 14 months of 50, 60, 70-hour weeks on this, that I'm starting to see the revenue. So I did an income report last month, a full transparent income report of what I did on the podcast, the money I spent, the money I made. And I think people were a little bit impressed with the numbers. And then a couple of people said, oh, I want to do a podcast. And I've tried to say, okay, that's cool, but this is everything you need to be prepared for. Prepare for it. Like, it isn't easy.
It takes, my daily show, I do 4-minute crypto. I talk to people a lot, and oh, I love that show. It's quick and must be easy for you. I'm going, yeah, it takes me about 2 hours. And the show's 4 minutes long. By the time I research it, write my script, produce the show, because I produce it as a video, and then I try to take it on one take. So sometimes that 4 minutes takes me 10 takes to get it with one take, and then edit it up, and then edit out the video, edit out the audio. I mean, it's like 2 hours, every day. And people go, oh, 4 minutes, that's really quick for you.
Yeah. Well, you listen to my podcast, right? I do an intro, an ad break, and an outro. And that's the worst bit for me. Because when you record an interview, even if you make mistakes, you just kind of accept it. But when you're doing an intro, or when I'm doing the intro, I'm making all kinds of mistakes. I'm getting words wrong. I'm stuttering. I used to try to do them in one take, and it took so long. So now what I do is I'm recording my intro. If I make a mistake, I just leave it and re-say the sentence, and I go back and edit it.
I was doing a long outro the other day, and I did the same thing. I tried doing it in one take, and I did it like 5-6 times for a new outro I was doing. I probably just did it one line at a time, and then got rid of the space between the lines, edited it out, because I could never get it. So I understand. I have one topic here that probably has to do with crypto out of our whole interview, and I know our time is running out, so I want to go to that topic. You used to basically be, I think, and I could be wrong, but when you started, I think you were a much bigger fan of altcoins. And I think you're becoming a Bitcoin maximalist from listening to you as long as I have, because I guess I've listened a long time in the amount of shows you have. So what are your thoughts on that, and what are your thoughts on Bitcoin maximalism?
Yeah, it's an interesting point, and I get some stick about this sometimes when people, they're like, oh, you're just a Bitcoin maximalist now, blah, blah, blah. But I didn't just make a conscious decision. Well, firstly, I don't consider myself a Bitcoin maximalist, but I didn't make a conscious decision just to be a Bitcoiner, right? This is the natural result of 66 interviews. And with 66 interviews, then you're talking about all the prep. So that's 66 days prep, and then listening to the interviews, and then taking it in a meeting with people, and just kind of trying to rationalize this whole space in my head. And, and what's happened is over time, I've kind of started to understand why Bitcoin is so important, and why Bitcoin could be a real game changer for money across the world, and also why it can accumulate in value. And then also because of that, I started to understand, like, there's really little point to these, fort coins, these alternative currencies, Litecoin, Dash. Bitcoin itself is going to struggle enough for adoption. These other ones are also going to struggle. And then I've also started looking at these protocols, and I'm just thinking, these are really complicated. And I think people are trying to fix something where the problem doesn't exist. And there's so much rubbish in the industry that I've kind of just, the way I talk about it is the gravity. So I don't say I'm a Bitcoin maximalist, but I'm definitely a maximalist sympathizer. I do try and keep an open mind. Like today's show that's going out is about Ethereum. We had a bearish case for Ethereum show recently with Tudormista, and following that, I've got a couple of Ethereum guys like offering counter arguments, and I'm happy to do that. I'm more than happy to hear counter arguments. But just on a personal level, for me now, I hold Bitcoin and I hold some Monero. But I mean, I'm even thinking of selling my Monero now and just sticking with Bitcoin, because I don't know, it's just I can't put my finger on one exact reason, but over time, that's why I've just found myself.
I heard that episode with Tor. Tor spoke at our conference at BitBlock Boom last year.
Okay.
I saw Charlie Lee make a Twitter post about this a couple weeks ago, and I think there's some truth to this. I think you have Bitcoin maximalists, and then I think you have maybe Bitcoin extremists. I don't think Bitcoin maximalists are just one group. I think there are different levels. I consider myself on the lower level of a Bitcoin maximalist. I think Bitcoin is the coin. I think Bitcoin's going to be the future. I think Bitcoin is going to be the one. But then again, though, I don't mind messing around with other coins if I think I can make a quick dollar. So that's how I look at it. But I think there are different levels of Bitcoin maximalists. I don't think they should all be grouped together, personally.
But I think sometimes attacking Bitcoin maximalism sometimes is a distraction from the point that Bitcoin maximalists are making, and it's like a diversion tactic. Like I like Charlie Lee. I've got a lot of respect for Charlie Lee, and he came on the podcast very early, very kind. I like the guy. But what I've noticed is there's like a lot of these people involved in Bitcoin early on, whether it's Charlie Lee, Roger Ver, Eric Voorhees, whether it's Brian Armstrong. They're compromised now. They've worked on other projects outside of Bitcoin, and none of them. It doesn't seem like anyone wants to come forward and say, yeah, I got this wrong. No, like nobody wants to admit they might have been wrong, and I always think it's a really credible thing to do. I don't think there's any future for Litecoin. Charlie's in a really tough position because he sold the top essentially. For him to turn around and say there's no future for Litecoin, it just won't happen. But I just don't see any, especially with Lightning Network coming. What is the use case for Litecoin? I just don't see it. It's got a great community. Charlie Lee's a great guy, but I just don't see any use for it. And I think that's the case with all these people. People have discovered Bitcoin, then they've wanted to do other things, and most of them haven't really worked out great. But nobody is ever going to turn around and go, yeah, I got it wrong. But what will end up happening is I think time will prove them wrong. If we're here in 5 years, I just can't see people using Litecoin in 5 years. I can't see people using most of these tokens. I think we need a big washout, and I think that's a reality where we are. Like with Coinbase, I think Coinbase is going to. Coinbase is going to face some kind of situation in the future for because they've added all these kind of altcoins, these naff altcoins to their website that nobody needs, and I think they're all going to just face the consequences at some point, whether it's a year, 3 years, 5 years. But I don't think it's going to work out particularly well for them.
Yeah, I could see that, and I agree with you. I think Charlie Lee would have a hard time saying, yeah, I sold at the highest price it ever was, but, you guys stuck in there, and you're wrong. I was smart to get out, which he was smart to get out. Let's go to some real quick questions.
Sure, man.
I have real quick. Who do you follow in the crypto space?
Well, I follow a lot of people. I follow like 1,200 people.
Let's not go over all 1,200.
No.
Give me the top three.
Okay.
Or three or four of them. Not even the top three or four that come to your head.
Picking top three is really hard. My views always change, but the people who come to the top of my mind, I'm a big fan of Nick Carter. I really like his work, but I really like his temperament. I just think he's a really great guy, and I really like. Recently, I've come to really appreciate Melton Demures, who came on the podcast. I really like her approach. I like the way she talks. I'm a big fan of Jill Carlson. I'm a big fan of Tour de Mista. There's a lot of people I like, a lot of people I'm big fans on. But I'm also I'm really interested in John Carvalho, who I had on the podcast recently about defending Bitcoin. But I'm also really interested in companies. Like I'm really interested in companies that are building products which create value, which have a use case. So I'm a big fan of Bitrefill, which John Carvalho's at. I'm a big fan of BlockFi, who are a sponsor of mine. But I'm not just saying it because they're a sponsor. They're creating products that people are using. And I'm a big fan of Casa, actually. And all of these companies that approach design in a good way. So whilst I'm interested in and follow people, there are certainly companies I'm really interested in as well, because the future of crypto is going to rely on companies that build things that create value. And I think that's super interesting as well. Let me throw a couple of curveballs out. Well, not curveballs, but I'm also a massive fan of Hasu. He's I think he's just a fantastic writer. There's another guy who's writing I like called Tony Sheng. Again, I really, really like his writing. And I'm also a big fan of a guy called Dan Held. James Presswich recently. I loved his Medium post about ETH2, as somebody who has to build this stuff. He was, breaking down the real complexities of it. I mean, look, I could sit here all day naming people, but I think we're very lucky to have so many bright minds in the space, and I will have missed people off, which I apologize for. But I think we're very blessed to have a space full of such intelligent people who are working so hard and creating so much great content.
Well, that was a good list. What's your favorite book?
My favorite book? Oh, what a great question. Yeah, I don't read a lot of books. I should read a lot more books. What is my favorite book? Do you know what my favorite book was to read for my children? We used to have this book called Dinosaur Raw, and it was the book we could read the quickest. When they used to go to bed, I was like,
that's the way it is when you have kids and you got to read to them every night.
my daughter used to get out this book, which was about like this fairy godmother, and it was a thick book. like it would take 30 minutes to read. And then I got this Dinosaur Raw book where we would do the sounds and we could get through it in about 2 minutes and then she'll go to bed. But in terms of books, I really like, I forgot the name of it now. Oh, Catcher in the Rye. I really, really like Catcher in the Rye.
I read that when I was 14.
I read that last year.
Oh, really? I would like to read that again because I read it when I was 14, and I bet it would mean, now that I'm 64 almost, so it'd be 50 years later, I bet it's going to be a whole different book to me and have whole different meanings than it did when I was 14.
I bet it does, actually. There's a couple of I'm a big fan of Romeo and Juliet. Like, I love Shakespeare. Romeo and Juliet is probably my favorite. Well, I guess you'd put that down as, would you call that a poem? Play?
I don't know. Catcher in the Rye, I think that was J.D. Salinger's only book.
Yeah, he was.
That he ever wrote.
Yeah, he was.
Yeah. My 10th grade literature teacher was into that.
I also I love the Odyssey. So I studied classical civilization at school, so we read Home as well. So we did the Iliad, the Aeneid, and the Odyssey, and I really, really liked the Odyssey.
I have not read that. Let's get into what advice would you give a crypto newbie?
Don't be a trader. Just don't trade.
That's probably good advice.
Most people are going to lose. Like, if someone makes $1 million, like that $1 million has come from a bunch of people losing. Like, it's pretty much a zero-sum game outside of Bitcoin. Just don't be a trader. If you want to get something, get some Bitcoin, put it away for 10 years, and don't think about it. But you're most likely going to get wrecked. It's really hard trading.
I also, getting back to Charlie, I saw a quote he made one time, or a statement he made one time, that his best advice was to buy a whole Bitcoin before you bought any other altcoin. And before you got into that trading stuff, at least have a Bitcoin, an entire Bitcoin that you accumulated. And for a lot of people, that may take a while to accumulate, so maybe you would learn a lot before you got in there and started messing around on trading. Next week, we have Joel Comm. Do you know Joel, Bad Crypto Podcast?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I do. I had a dream about him once.
A dream? Okay, tell me about this so I can tell him next week.
I think I tweeted it to him actually once.
Okay.
Oh, God, just like some weird dream. I can't even remember what it was about, but he was huge in it. I can't remember it. I like those guys. I think they bring a really good kind of vibe to the crypto space. I don't listen to their podcast enough, but sometimes, like, if you don't want to have something too hardcore, I think it's a great listen.
And they even make fun of themselves, calling themselves the crypto clowns and the Bitcoin blockheads. I think Joel, I started online, my first website in 96. I think he started the year before me in 95. So him and I felt like we had a lot in common on this interview coming up. Hey, where can people find you, follow you, all the scoop there that everybody wants to know?
Well, if they're interested in checking out my podcast, I mean, you just have to Google What Bitcoin Did. You'll find the website. It's whatbitcoindid.com. If you search in iTunes, it's What Bitcoin Did. If you want to talk to me on Twitter, I'm at Peter McCormack. You should be able to find that pretty easy. My DMs are open. I pretty much talk to anyone who, as long as they don't want me to shill some nonsense. But I'm at, if you search for What Bitcoin Did, you'll find me.
Well, that's easy enough. That's an easy way to find you. Well, I appreciate you coming on the show, and I'm serious about what I said earlier. I want you to consider coming to a BitBlock Boom. Maybe we should even, we're going to do some panels up there. Maybe we could get you on a panel or something, get you involved with BitBlock Boom this year. So I'm serious about that. So look at the site and let's talk about that.
I would love to
later, but I think I'd like to meet you in person to boot. So thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, and any excuse to come back to Texas. I loved it. And I would love to come out and happily sit on a panel. No problem. You just let me know, man. But thank you for having me on your podcast.
Yeah, everybody had a blast last year. I think it was being in Texas. We had a Bitcoin brunch on Sunday, which not only about 20 people went to, but like almost all the speakers were there. And then maybe about another 10 people besides the speakers. And it was like just fantastic. I mean, that was, I think, the best part was the Bitcoin brunch. So, and the Mexican food was so good. If you like Mexican food, we had great Mexican food. Hey, well, Peter, I really enjoyed having you on the show and getting to meet you, and I look forward to talking to you again. I really enjoyed it. Any last thing you want to say or anything before we get out of here?
No worries. No, nothing at all. Just thank you for having me on. Good luck with what you do, and I'll make sure I go and add you to my list now because I have listened to one of yours. I think I listened to a Trace Mayer interview in preparation for my interview with him.
Oh, yeah.
But I don't have you on regular rotation, but I would definitely add you to my list because I'm always looking for new podcasts to listen to. And I think the great thing about this space, there's so many good podcasts now that we can all learn from each other. So yeah, just thank you for having me on.
Podcasting, I think, should be like car lot marketing is what I call it. I know there's like some great term for this probably already, but if you ever go to look for cars, have you ever noticed they're all on the same street or on the same block? They're all in the same area. Car lots just don't go off by themselves and go, no, I don't want any other car lots by me because I don't want to share the competition. Car lots all go, let's all get together, or at least places in the U.S., and we'll all make more money because all the shoppers will come to this one area. And that's the way I think podcasts are. I think all podcasts do better when they all are together and they all work together and they all help each other. Yeah, so I call it car lot marketing, but I don't know. There's probably a better name for it than that. Thanks for coming on the show.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
I hope you enjoyed today's show. A big thank you to all the cousins out there that are showing their support by donating, subscribing, and leaving great reviews on iTunes. All of those things help more than you realize. Now, you can subscribe almost anywhere podcasts are available by going to CryptoCousins.com/subscribe. Call me with your comments or questions at 747-777-9471. Or you can email me at TheCryptoCousins@gmail.com, and I'll try to use these on future episodes. Please take a peek at the 4-Minute Crypto Show, which is produced every weekday and located at 4minutecrypto.com. It's the place to get your daily dose of crypto news, and it's always 4 minutes or less. And one last thing, please take a look at my new website, Crypto Crybaby. This website is for the true crypto fan and sells Bitcoin and crypto gear like t-shirts, caps, and so much more. Take a look at CryptoCrybaby.com today. Thanks again for listening. Love you guys.
Thanks for listening to the Crypto Cousins podcast. Please share the show with your friends. They can subscribe by going to CryptoCousins.com/subscribe. And if you want to know more about Gary, just go to GaryLeland.com. Make sure and join Gary and all the Crypto Cousins every week for a new episode of the Crypto Cousins podcast. The Crypto Cousins podcast and the information included in the podcast are not intended as investment advice. Investing in any cryptocurrency is risky, and you should never invest more than you can afford to lose. Always seek professional advice before investing in any cryptocurrency. Please understand, you are using any and all information from the Crypto Cousins at your own risk.